Tourism Act 2011 requires the Council to publish an annual pay policy statement for chief officers. This must be approved by Council by the 31st of March each year. Like many other local authorities, Thurrock's statement includes a pay policy for all categories of employees which reflects existing employment terms and conditions. This report seeks approval for the Council's annual pay policy statement for 2022-23. Members will recall the new pay structure implemented in April 2019 removed the direct link with the National Pay Award. However, the Council maintains the commitment to commission an annual independent market assessment to ensure that the Council's reward structure remains competitive and reflects both market and employment trends. Pay for senior managers is governed by the pay strategy and pay policy for assistant directors and director posts agreed in 2009 and determined by annual independent market assessments. The recommendations reflect those from the independent market assessments and for apprenticeships, the government's budget statement published in October 2021. This year's pay policy statement follows the established format and clearly sets out intentions for pay across all levels of roles. The key elements of this year's policy are 2.8% pay increase for Thurrock's living wage to meet the national minimum wage target of £9.50, 2.5% pay increases for bands A and B, 2.25% pay increases for bands C to I, 2.25% pay increase for senior managers, maintaining the national living wage for apprenticeships. This ensures we are attractive as a prospective employer for apprentices and can use our apprentice levy to great effect. The pay policy has been shared and discussed with our recognised trade unions and no issues have been raised. We are required to publish the pay policy by the end of March and therefore ask you all to support this recommendations and agree the pay policy.
Councillor Kemp, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and we will not be voting to endorse this pay policy statement this evening. We all know, Madam Mayor, that we're in the grips of a cost of living crisis. Inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, the CPI measure, is running at 5.5%. That's the highest level for 30 years. And the Retail Price Index, the RPI, is running at 7.8%. Madam Mayor, that's important because the RPI includes costs such as housing, and it's used to calculate things like increases in train fares, mobile phone tariffs, various taxes, and the interest charged on student loans. People across Thurrock are being hit hard by the triple whammy of soaring energy costs, an impending 10% national insurance tax rise, and low wage growth. Given that backdrop, it's just not right that we are offering our frontline workers just a 2.5% pay increase. And this after they've already endured years of pay freezes and real terms pay cuts. This is effectively a further 3% pay cut as measured on CPI and 5.3% pay cut on RPI. And Madam Mayor, these are the men and women who look after our vulnerable old folk and our youngest children, those who empty our bins, sweep our streets, cut our grass, rip our roads, and so much else besides. Many of these we were happy to stand on our doorsteps and clap during the height of the pandemic. And just earlier this evening, they were thanked by the leader of the council for their hard work clearing up after the storms at the weekend. Madam Mayor, not only is this fundamentally unfair to those men and women, but other employers will become more attractive to them as they're able to offer pay rises that help workers stay on top of their bills. If we add to that the insecurity caused by the threats to cut hundreds of jobs at the council that is hanging over many of our staff, there must be a very real risk of losing valuable members of staff. Can the portfolio holder tell us what assessment he has made of the risk of low pay and job insecurity on employee retention rates? Then we come to the issue of senior officer pay. And I have to remind members that between 2010 and 2016, no senior officer at Thurrock received a pay increase at all. And every year during that time, Conservative members would stand up and demand that those officers took a 5% pay cut. And as we all know, those calls for a cut were soon replaced with a series of pay increases, and we're asked this evening to endorse another increase. I have to say, I have no problem with any officer receiving a fair annual increase, but I've always had a problem with flat rate increases. For instance, we're told that the inflation rate for bread is likely to be 20% this year. That will take the price of an average cut white loaf from £1.10 to £1.32, an increase of 22 pence. The recommended 2.5% increase for a frontline worker is worth about £10 per week. The 2.25% increase for something on 50,000 is £21 a week. And on 100,000, it's £42 a week. That loaf of bread still goes up by the same amount. And if you happen to be sitting at the top of the tree, it's an £80 a week pay rise. Madam Mayor, that is 700% more than the increase proposed for a frontline worker. And I think that level of differential is just obscene. The Council's pay policy should be rooted in fairness and offer all our workforce some real help with the cost of living crisis. And this does neither of those things.
Councillor Bale, would you like to say?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councillor Duffy. Mr. Chair. I was interested in the report from a man at manufacturing felt 120% pay rise, and he wants to throw out a few crumbs to our genuine workers. If we are to retain the best people, we have to give them no reason to leave. If we fail to look after our staff over leaving, we'll be left with a very weak workforce. With the staff culling we are going to do or about to do, there is no excuse for us to retain any dead with poor performance or sick notes. There's nothing will kill a greater employee than seeing you tolerate bad ones. So, can we afford, the question a lot of people say, can we afford to pay more than this token gesture? My answer would be to that is, can we afford not to? The other thing, Councillor Duffy, will our used and abused casual and agency staff see an increase in money? Please, thank you.
Councillor Massey, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Would any other member like to speak on this report? Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll be brief and in some ways echo what Councillor Kent has said, is that there's many of us that do and can look back onto the years when we were called to not increase the senior officers' posts salaries, and yes, they too have got a cost of living increase, but their shoulders are a lot broader than somebody that sweeps our streets, cleans our parks, you know, empties our bins. So it's not, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to look at this, and also I think I read a line in the report that the unions haven't agreed these pay increases. So it's maybe a little bit presumptuous of you to say that people are accepting that this will be their pay rise, when across the sectors they're getting much more than 2%. People are buckling down. Seniors who have got the broadest shoulders are saying pay the frontline staff the bigger amount of money, because we can take it a little bit better than they can, who are just about to have a 4% increase in their rents here locally. Council taxes going up, their train fares are going up, their gas and electricity is going up, their petrol to get to work to clean our streets and empty our bins is going up. So it wouldn't change the budget envelope for us to look at this again. I think that it just isn't fair that there's a flat rate across it. I think that our lowest paid workers should be paid more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duffy, do you wish to sum up? I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and obviously thank you, Councillor Duffy, for the report. We're often told that we have to be reminded things from the Leader of the Opposition, and we have to remind him something as well. 6 years ago, and it was a bit of a touche moment, the Leader of the Opposition, as he was then, when we put this paper forward after national policy of freezing public sector pay, so it wasn't stuff that was mandated by us at a local level, it was mandated by a national level. When that relaxed after the 2015 general election and moving into the 2016 year, I was reminded that the pressures and the responsibilities and the shoulders of administration are far cry from the words that can be sprung from the opposition. Because we have called for a number of things in terms of senior salary pay cuts and so forth like that. And my simple response to the opposition was touche. There is an element of making sure that we have an organisation which can run and operate, but is as generous as possible in the terms that it is currently, whilst reflecting the pressures that there are. Now, there was a question that was raised around around equitability and loss of resource outside of the organisation, migrating out. There is, of course, always risk here. However, the private sector are experiencing the very same pressures, some of them that have been absolutely hammered through a COVID pandemic. So there isn't necessarily anywhere for other people to go to. I totally, fully get the point that's being raised. The truth of the matter is, to fund the increase that you're expecting would mean that we will need to increase council tax even further. It's a simple factor of maths. So perhaps you're going to ask for a council tax increase above the 2.99% that's being put forward tonight. The truth be told is, to do that we'd have to fund extra, so perhaps you'll be publicly calling for an increase to fund the salary increase, because obviously money doesn't grow on trees.
Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Hebb has said probably as much as what I was about to say, and it'd be interesting later on to see that we'd all like to pay huge pay rises to our staff. They all deserve a big pay rise, but there are budget restraints, and it'd be interesting to see later this evening if the Labour group, the very small Labour group that is now, will actually be voting in favour of a bigger council tax rise, because a bigger council tax rise would hit our residents just as hard as the cost of living crisis as well.
Thank you. Councillor Coxon. Would you like to speak?
I will for a while. Well, I never really saw the opportunity. I don't know when I know that, but thank you. No, I take the point of Councillor Warren about the moving the budget, keeping within the budget envelope. And I'm sitting here thinking about that, and I'm thinking, obviously, the only way to give a substantial increase is to go over that and have a referendum. I'm glad that you're not, are you saying that, and if you are saying that we should have a referendum to go over the budget envelope, which we'll discuss in the latest paper, because moving a small amount of money, because of a small amount of senior officers, to a large amount of officers, officers or employees at the lower levels, will not give us enough money to be substantial change in the envelope. The envelope is there and out. So if that would give a job of actually moving, I could take your point, if there was a substantial amount of funding there, but just moving that small amount over would be insignificant compared to what we actually really want to do, if we want to do what Councillor Kent was talking about actually that loaf of bread. So the only way to solve that is what my colleagues have said, is increase over the price of 2.99%. And if we go over 2.99%, there is a referendum on that, and then the referendum, and are you saying that the people of Thurrock should be voting in May as well as that for a referendum to increase the council tax to pay the staff? Now, I think we've taken a fair decision here that we can actually make sure it's equal across all our employees and value every employee, from the person who's cleaning our streets to the chief executive. They're employees of this council, and we should have fairly treatment the same.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to say I'd be surprised that that was coming this evening, but I'm not. Obviously, we've all seen headlines along this line in Thurrock, but we've got to put this into perspective, Madam Mayor. We've been lectured on the triple whammy of this, that, and everything else, increasing inflation, which, you know what, it is, and it's terrible. We've written to the Chancellor asking for VAT and indeed the green levies to be removed. Hopefully, one would hope that he listens and heeds the words of all of the councillors in Thurrock and does that, and it will help out everybody who pays a domestic fuel bill. But to get salaries up and above the level, to the level of inflation, officers, what I've been informed me would be roughly 3% extra, which would cost 4.3 extra over and above the 2.99 that's being proposed tonight on council tax. That's £1.16 a week on the average family property, which is approximately that loaf of bread that Councillor Kent referred to in his speech. We've got to remember that our pay is competitive compared with other local authorities. So for similar jobs, we're actually paying quite well. We do attract and keep people. And when we say about other organisations coaching our staff want to better serve. We've got to remember, when it comes to the private sector on much higher pay, where does that higher pay come from? It doesn't come from the chief executive insert name of company they're working for. It comes from the customer that has to buy for them, buy from them, sorry, which then drives up the inflation. So it's an ever-increasing cycle. And I'm sorry, I can't really burden our taxpayer with something over and above the 2.99 that is ring-fenced to help those most vulnerable in Thurrock, to help support the carers that do a fantastic job to care for them. But at the same time, we are also having to shift everything around in the council to make sure we can afford the pay rise for those that are on lower pay, and indeed those that are on higher pay. Equally had to take a bit of a hammering over the past few years. We are, and Councillor Kent is quite correct, we have repeatedly said that the higher management need to take that 5% pay cut. But as the chief executive reminds me frequently, sometimes without prompting, the number of senior officers at the top and the amount of pay is actually less than what it was when she first took over. So it might not take that 5%, but across that board, they took that 5%. And indeed, if we look on page 47, where it says about senior management pay awards, we've got 8.25 as a national award, and in Thurrock, we've only done 6.25.
We need to sum up.
Sorry, that went there. So it shows we're really doing quite well. I'm sorry. We will be supporting this paper. And yeah, as everybody else has said, Councillor Kent wants to propose an extra 4.3% on council tax when it comes to it. I'm sure we'll discuss it, and I'm sure the Conservatives will vote it down. Thank you.
Councillor Duffy, would you want to sum up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it was just disappointing the whole way this started, and it's sort of a reflection of what we have in opposition. It started with, we're voting against this. It wasn't, I'll come forward with some ideas, here's an alternative that you can put forward and support. It's just, no. And that is really, really disappointing. There was no ideas of, we'd like to replace this recommendation with a new plan. It's just, no. We're saying no. We heard just a random assortment of percentages from Councillor Kent. Is he really proposing up to a 10% increase in council tax on top of the 2.99? Because that's where the money has to come from. It doesn't just magically appear down the back of someone's sofa. So if the opposition actually wants to start behaving like an opposition, they could have come tonight with an actual plan and then put that to a vote. And by all means, that might not get voted through. I'm not promising that's going to happen, but at least some plan and a bit of effort would show an improvement from a group that is dwindling in numbers and completely dried up when it comes to any form of plan.
I will now proceed to the recommendation. Are members in agreement with the